Hello. Now I'm going to talk briefly about citations and references, and in particular, how to integrate citations into your text successfully. There are different formats for citations and for references. You can see some of the different citation formats here. Notice that some use commas, for example, and some don't. I'm going to be using the citation format that we use at the University of Westminster, which is laid out in our referencing guide. So next I'm going to show you different ways to use citations and talk briefly about the advantages and disadvantages of each. So the first one you see here, the direct quotation, you can see that the original author's text is written out exactly as she wrote it, and then we have her name and the date of publication of her article and the page number. This allows you to use the author's exact words. And I find that writers often overuse this style. Consider that, for example, I do not read Arabic, but I could certainly copy Arabic by looking at the letters and writing them down, but I wouldn't understand them, right? That can be the problem with direct quotations like this one. Sometimes people copy the words and use them in their own writing, but it doesn't provide evidence that the student writer understands what she or he is writing. So it's probably best to avoid direct quotations, especially entire sentences like we see here. Avoid it as much as possible and prefer to try to use your own words, which then shows that you've not only read the author, but that you've understood what he or she said, what he or she wrote. Direct quotation 2, as you see here, provides some of that mixing of the writer's words and the words being cited from Colin. I realize some people pronounce that differently. Where I'm from, this name is pronounced Colin. Here we can see that the author has used some of their own words and directly quoted Colin to an extent, which is, I think, better than the previous example. But better still is to do, like you see here, an indirect quotation. This is also sometimes called a paraphrase, where you've entirely rewritten what the original author said in your own words, but without changing the meaning. This provides that proof that you are able to read things and then reword them without changing the meaning, and therefore it demonstrates that you've understood them. That would be the kind of thing you would expect if I told you I understood Arabic, right? You would expect me to be able to read it and then translate it into English. Now here you're not translating it from one language to another, but you're translating the meaning from one set of words to a different set of words that keep that same meaning. And that really demonstrates that you have understood what you've read. And it gives your readers the chance to see your writing, which is really what they want to see, right? How do you express yourself? Not how does someone else express herself in this case. Now, better still, what you see here is the final form where it's again an indirect quotation. It's been written in the writer's own words. The citation still appears, but notice how now Colin's name appears at the start of the sentence as part of the grammar of the sentence. Why do I think this is the best way to use citations? There are two main reasons. First of all, this is probably the most natural way to write. This is how we talk when we are discussing. If I'm talking about a film that you ask me, how did you like, you ask me, what about that film? Should we see that film? And I would say something like, Macy said it was terrible. He said he loved it. She said she thought it was funny, right? I use the people's names or he or she as part of the sentence. She said this, Macy said that, they said this. That's what you're doing here, right? Colin 2021 explains that Irish people, and so on. So it's probably a more natural way of writing because that's what you're used to doing in everyday life. Second, the other advantage to writing this way is it allows you to choose a reporting verb to express your authorial opinion about what you're quoting indirectly more accurately. By reporting verbs, I mean verbs like these: colon explains, colon examined, colon argues, colon claims. Using a reporting verb like this allows you more precision than just saying colon writes, right? Colon explains makes it evident that this is an explanation. Colon examined, this tells you that she was doing some sort of research and this was her findings from the research. Colon argues, this tells you that whatever it is that she's writing about is perhaps controversial, is perhaps not necessarily a fact, right? Colon claims, you could use this to show that you're not sure, that you don't necessarily believe what she has written, right? You know how it is when you say, well, he claims he was sick, but I saw him playing football later that day, that sort of thing, right? So using the author's name as part of the grammar of your sentence, followed by the citation, the year in brackets, followed by an accurate reporting verb, followed by your own paraphrase of the original information, is probably, for the most part, the most mature form of using a citation in your writing. Other than that, there's just one more thing I want to tell you because it comes up quite a bit, I find, and that's citing secondary sources. What you see here is, read it and you'll see O'Rourke 2011 argues that new speakers of Irish can still be authentic language users, cited in Colin 2021, page 47. What this means is that the student writer who wrote this has read Colin, and while reading Colin, she read about O'Rourke 2011. So Colin is the primary source that she's reading, but she's read about O'Rourke, which is the secondary source. That's what's meant by citing secondary sources. It's possible to cite information from a secondary source out of the primary source that you're reading. When possible, find the original source. Find O'Rourke in this case, if you can, to check that Colin has accurately presented O'Rourke's information. Sometimes people make mistakes. I'm not suggesting that here, but you want to try, if possible, to find the original source. If you can't, it's possible to cite a secondary source, as has been done here. Try not to do it too much. Better to show that you're reading the originals when possible. Good. Finally, for the list of references, we have something as appears at right here, where you see the full information that would allow a reader to find this source if they wanted to. We see the author's name, Colin, and the first initial. You see the year of publication. You see the title of the article. Then in italics, you see Journal of Sociolinguistics. This is the journal in which the article was published. Then you have the volume and issue number. 25 is the first number. That's the volume number. Normally what the volume number tells you is that this journal has been published for that many years. So in this case, it tells you that this is the 25th year that the Journal of Sociolinguistics has been published. Then you have the issue number, in this case 1. That means that this is the first issue of this year. So this is the first issue of 2021. And finally, you have the page range, 44 to 61. That tells you that if you were to look in this journal, you would look at page 44 and you would find this reference. Some people, some universities may also use the term bibliography. Sometimes bibliography is synonymous with list of references, sometimes it is not. I prefer to use the term list of references, as the University of Westminster does, to mean that you're providing a list of all of the sources that you have cited in the text. You do not need to list any sources that you read but did not cite. That doesn't really provide much. Sometimes people want to list a bunch of sources at the end, but if they're not cited in the text, it doesn't provide any evidence that you actually read them. It doesn't provide any evidence of what you've learned from them. So to be the most precise, your list of references should only include those sources that you have cited in the text in alphabetical order, following the correct formatting. Thank you very much. Bye.